leaving. We are live now.
We are live. Okay, hello. I warmly welcome you to our 68th webinar by the Academy of Space Renaissance International. My name is Sabine Heinz, and I'm the person responsible for our webinar series together with Adriano Ottino. On this 2nd of September, I'm really delighted that you have come to join us. And our today's special guest is Dr. Dinis Afonso Ribeiro. Hello, Dinis.
Hello. Hi.
And we are really glad that you are here again to spread your knowledge with us. And Dinis will talk today about beyond recycling, designing for disassembly and cultivating future biodiversity.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, I think Sabine's screen froze, I'm afraid.
Yeah. I don't know why. Yeah, problems.
I disconnected all non-essentials.
Okay. Hello, Sabine. Welcome back.
Yes, yeah. And sorry. Yeah, the internet in Germany is also not very well. Okay. I don't know what was the last one, what you heard. I was talking. Also, the topic Dinis will talk about is beyond recycling, designing for disassembly and cultivating future biodiversity using the ISS. I also would like to welcome Adriano Ottino. He is one of our vice presidents and former president of Space Renaissance International, and he is one of the founders of SRI. I warmly welcome you, Adriano. Hello.
Thank you very much. Welcome to you. Welcome to Dinis, and I'm very eager to listen to this lecture. That should be very, very interesting about recycling ISS. And yeah, we are in the middle of very, very crowded weeks of work because we are preparing the 19th of September Space 18 SDG workshop in New York City at the UN headquarters. And we are also working about the expanding humanity into outer space, the workshop managed by Ghanim Al-Taibi. And we have 3 teams competing. Maybe there will be 4, but by now there are 3 teams competing to preparing a basic idea, but conceptual design of an habitat for 100 people to be located in a Lagrange point between Earth and the Moon. So a lot of work, and we are also working for the IAC, the International Astronautical Federation Congress in Milan in October, where we will hopefully have a booth, a big booth, 20 square meters, hosting all of the partners, the 95 partners now that compose the coalition for the Space 18 SDG. So, okay, you see, we are working very much. The holidays and now the summer holidays are already remembered. And okay, so I think we can give the floor.
Not still, I have to present him to our audience. Yes. Dinis, before I give you the floor, I would like to introduce you to our audience. Thank you, Adriano, first for your nice introduction. Dr. Dinis Afonso Ribeiro investigated connections between oceans and space exploration at the scientific and industrial level focusing on novel ways to develop permanent human settlements. The ideas have been developed very gradually since 1985 and first published on this subject in 1988 in the US and 1990 in Europe. Dinis got his Bachelor of Arts, Political Science and Government at the University of Austin, Texas. And he keeps researching for a PhD in political science at Lusophone University of Humanities and Technologies. The theme is a comparative study of the mechanism underlying the development of national space agencies in different countries. New models of organization of scientific exploration and industrial development of outer space. Comparative study of activities in various extreme environments in various countries, such as polar areas, deserts, underwater activities, and aeronautics and space. Dr. Dinis Ribeiro's skills and knowledge include scientific exploration and industrial development projects in extreme environments, as I mentioned, deserts, polar regions, disaster areas, sea, oceans, underwater activities, aeronautics, space, and so on. Geopolitical studies focusing in industrial development and scientific policy. He also is involved in international politics, space science, technology, and policy, marine science, scientific diving, and underwater robotics. Dinis, the floor is yours. Oh, you are muted. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's truly a pleasure to be here. And actually, the feedback from my first presentation in December 2022 was very thought-provoking. One of the comments brought up a book that I knew that I'm going to mention. And that one and some other presentations that I've seen have been really, really very useful for my research. In a way, Space Renaissance is almost like the advanced concepts at ESA or the NASA also futures projects. And I've been able to become more familiar with work from other people that I would never have known. And they're extremely useful for what I'm trying to do. So I'm really appreciative of that as well.
Thank you. So you may start. Adriano will share the screen for you.
You want me to share your presentation or you want to try sharing yourself?
I'd rather Adriano for the you just I'll tell you to skip the slides back and forth.
Just a moment.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's better that way.
Just a moment. We need to find it. Okay, Orbital compost PDF. I am opening it. Fine. And I need to share it. I need to share. That's it. I think you
Here we go. Yeah.
Full screen mode. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead and just tell me next slide when you're ready to go ahead.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. So the title is Orbital Compost Bins in the plural, because this is a broader approach, not just for ISS. However, I decided to focus more on the ISS situation. There's a lot of things that can be said about the future of ISS, but I decided to focus on some specific things that I know a little bit more about and that can be turned into specific projects. On the first slide, that image next to the ISS is of a forest, and that's the forest canopy. Okay, but so and so the whole idea of living in space is very interesting because actually we live in space, and here to the left you can see the spaceship Earth, which is the spacecraft where we are. And actually, in science fiction literature, there are a number of works about generational spacecraft where the voyage is so long that several generations live and die during the voyage. And if we want to look at it that way, actually, I think it's a thought-provoking possibility, and it's connected to what I have in mind. So to the right, as you can see, the need to exchange ideas is fundamental. And during the Renaissance, there was a really huge exchange of many ideas among many people. And that led to the Enlightenment and true evolution like never before. So you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this slide, as you can see to the left, it touches upon what I'm working right now, is the visualization of huge amounts of data. There's even that website, Information is Beautiful, and it's a whole world on visualization that now the computer systems allow us to explore. And so I give you just an example. 486,000 routes to Rome, the old expression, todos os caminhos vão dar a Roma, in Portuguese as well as in many other. But the goal I have to show this looks like a tree is that actually I'm working on a visualization of some kind of a tree, and to map all space projects and the way they're connected between themselves and others as branches, which is a continuation of my earlier approach. And it's the same idea, but at a deeper level, because before I was thinking about the Mars underground, the Moon underground, the underwater underground, the Venus underground, the various undergrounds, as social groups that they have their own agendas and priorities and dreams and desires. And also the island one, the off-planet underground, if we want. Anyhow, to the left, you can see, I need the big screen again, please. Okay, yes. To the left, you see a sociogram. And Moreno did a lot of studies, and it's a sociometric test. It's a map, and each little sphere with a little letter is a person, and it maps the interactions between people. And on the visualization I'm working, those are like the tree rings. Okay. And so if you look at the image on the left and the image on the right with the Earth's gravity well, the moon, the asteroid, of course, has a much shallower, and Mars also has a gravity well, much shallower gravity well for asteroids. So basically what what in my mind, I can see it, I just haven't been able to turn it into a computer visualization. But I can see how that's one of the good things after watching many things over many years. You start seeing patterns, and so you can imagine from Earth a little, like a little vein or a little tree growing, with different branches. And some are pointing to Mars, others to the moon, others to the asteroids, others to the Space Force, others to the remote sensing market. So it's like a forest of little trees, and picking the idea of system of systems, which there's it's an expression for data studies. There's now I have the tree of trees, or forests of forests. It's just the same sort of fractal structure. Anyhow, not dwelling too much on it, I just want to point out that humans are on the upper. It's very small, one cannot see, but there's fungi, all the life forms that exist on spaceship Earth are listed. And there's a zoom in the animals, and we can see we're just one of them. Okay, so I'm working on a model where the activities on the ground, the activities, they're all connected. So almost like this roots to Rome kind of similar visualization. Anyhow, and there's also an example with the tree from you can see from the tree rings the time is going by, and but this is just data visualization, but I'm still working on it, and I've had really some interesting breakthroughs at the cognitive level from some of the presentations I've seen here in Space Renaissance. So the next one, please. The next slide, please. Okay, so this is from my first presentation, and this is just an extension. And I was bringing up the technium as a possibility. And in that presentation, there was already a very ultra simplified, very simple, in this kind of computer tree, all the computers, the different models that exist in a kind of visualization like that. But so, and the colored thing that looks like a sponge, of course, is one of the early maps of the internet. To the left, you see the whole idea of the evolution of spaceflight. And please, next slide. And here's a piece of the Kitty Hawk, the first plane that flew and actually was taken to the moon. So if it was a tree, actually physically, there's artifacts, and it's just a way to visualize the fact that there was an evolution from 1903 until 1969, and it just seems like a factoid. But if one wants, one can look at it at a deeper level. But this, to me, is an illustration of the connection that exists. Please, next slide. Okay. And so on my first presentation about the third underground, someone asked about the Millennial Project, where there was an idea that we would go first to the oceans and then to space, and it presented like several steps. And what I'm doing now, I'm using that as an initial template, and I'm broadening the concept. And I think it's actually one of the earliest descriptions similar to what I have in mind, which would be a tree that has the roots on ground-based activities, and that some authors describe as the technium. And the tip of the technium can be seen there, the skyscrapers in the desert, sort of growing towards the sky from a plane flying over them. But anyhow, so this Millennial Project actually had the connection between the ocean and space, but it had more, and I think it grows in both directions. And it's possible to visualize the connections using the incredible computing power we have nowadays. Next slide, please. Okay, that's just another attempt to show something that looks a little bit more what I have in mind. As you can see, it's the United States and Russia. You can see the V2 on the left, and then the connections between the different rockets. It's a bit dated. It's just an example of the way one can visualize the connections between different, in this case, the different rockets. On the right side, you have the Russian rockets, and you can see Buran, and just like a tree where a branch is cut and dies off, in the way I visualize everything I've seen until today on space projects. Sometimes the branches are twisted and they break off. Others grow and then they die. Others grow incredibly, and it's quite. But there's a main point of contact with the Earth, and of course, on the first slide we had Rome. Now we have Houston. We have Star City. We have French Guiana, where this thing has roots on the ground. But I can visualize it as something continuous, although made of obviously different things, but they're all connected, and I can visualize the connections in a fleeting way because I'm not able to see everything. I would need a real powerful computer, but I'm working on that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the one on the left, I have a copy that I got in Texas a long time ago, and it was from Rockwell, and it was the master plan for the human expansion into outer space. And what I'm doing is a 3D version of that, but with branches in different countries and just not on a single. But anyhow, it's an attempt to visualize the things that are obviously very complex. To point out also that they had a bit of an optimistic outlook, if you can see the years on the left, but that I hope to publish a more detailed scholarly article about all this. But just to give a feeling. And also, as a tree, sometimes the irrigation leads to dead ends, and in lots of ways, the idea of a labyrinth or a maze, they're different, and actually, in reality, it has more points where you can go in and more points where you can go out. But from what I've seen over the years, even in my own life, sometimes you explore thoroughly what you think is the way out of the maze, and then you realize you reach that end, and really have to go back. You have to go back to where you went on the wrong direction and try to explore different ways. And nowadays, with the internet and the younger generation and the global reach, these two mazes and labyrinths are incredibly simple compared with the real, if one were to and of course the length of one's lifetime, the little red line. Sometimes people try to reach the exit of the maze, and in the meantime they're no longer with us, they pass away. And so one continues and try to explore that path until hoping to find a way out of the maze. So I've also included in the work I'm doing, preparing a visualization, things having to do with the length of human life, because clearly this is bigger than any of us. Anyhow, and then of course the computer design. This is just also from a little bit rehashing some of the considerations of my first presentation, but there's a whole lot more to it. And we're not electrons, but the complexity is not infinite. It can be extremely complicated beyond the human mind, but it's not impossible to visualize, I think, or at least to get closer to a real picture, because all these three representations, they're feeble attempts at trying to describe what I can, in my mind's eye, I can more or less see. Next slide, please. And so looking at the recycling and the design for disassembly, the same way some authors look at it, and going again from the motherboard, even the name itself is quite interesting, motherboard, like mother planet or the anyhow. So yeah, so that's I want to highlight that yes, there are many different companies, different countries, but in the end, every artifact that we make is part of this technium, and it's all made on Earth by humans. So there's a common denominator that can be very fruitful. And one thinks about the Artemis Accords, trying to have interoperability. And then we have the people on ISS not being able to use the USB connectors from one suit from one company onto spacecraft from another company. And those two companies are even from the same country. So there's a lot of things to do. But the idea is doable, and I think it's exactly what needs to be done somehow. So please, next slide. Okay, so we've all seen that movie Wall-E about the pollution and the plant. And to me, the way this sort of artificial division between plants and machines is understandable, but at the cognitive level, I'm exploring other angles. Anyhow, I remember I once read an extensive article about the worst jobs in the future. And one of them would be to be a landfill miner for minerals in the future. And it's truly nightmarish. The smell, as you can well imagine, the toxicity, the danger, the sharp objects, and yet it's already happening. It's already happening, and it's very thought-provoking. And I believe in mining the asteroids, but the tools we need to do that can be developed on this spacecraft, on this planet where we are right now. And if they work here, they'll work there as well, because over there, outside Earth, it'll need to be also possible to reuse the minerals. By the way, and going back to Wall-E, you remember the movie, the little plant that brought life back to Earth and all that. I chose in the first image an image from the forest canopy that I'm going to explore in greater detail, because there's this whole idea of Mother Earth, the virgin forest, the nature, and yet the ground on the Amazon jungle, 8,000 years ago, humans fertilized, and Terra Preta is an example of that. Humans can actually manage this planet better than we're doing right now, perhaps. And those principles apply this planet, on this spacecraft, on spacecraft Earth, the spaceship Earth, and all other spaceships. The principles are the same. This is just a very huge thing, way beyond, like Gerald K. O'Neill was able to visualize something of a different dimension, like a Rendezvous with the Rama from Arthur C. Clarke. And I think they were on the right track. But just to really be able to look at Earth as a spacecraft, it really takes a lot of imagination. But it might be fruitful to look at it that way, because you don't want to do certain things on the spacecraft where you are. It might endanger the safety of the crew. So the principles are the same. Anyhow, next slide, please. By the way, on YouTube, I placed the links for the Terra Preta and articles about how actually the Amazon jungle, part of it was a garden we created 8,000 years ago. And so the idea of getting minerals on the outer planet and having Earth as a garden, in a certain way, if we want to look at it that way, it has been done before 8,000 years ago, and elsewhere. And so it's possible to live in harmony with the planet. And so anyways, the next point I want to try to make a big division is that when people talk about recycling things in outer space, they imagine a huge foundry that will be so costly, anyone will go bankrupt trying to do it, because they're thinking about a junkyard, not a salvage yard. And I also put links just to provide context about all these things. And I also put a link about metal theft and the fact that what needs to be done to allow deeper space exploration is already being done. The copper, bronze, people break things in graveyards. It's really thought-provoking already. So it's already going. We need those metals, and we're going to get them no matter how, even if we have to steal or break some perfectly intact device or a monument or anything. So these things are deeper, and they're already afoot in a dimension that I tried to touch upon on the other presentation about the sand wars, the problem with the construction industry and the sand on the planet. But it's actually it's a deeper, it's a more universal issue. And in a way, these metals are nutrients for that technium idea, or something, for the lack of a better word. I'm still looking. Tree of trees is really not that good. I'm still working on a better way to try to describe what I can. In my mind's eye, I can see something that is hard to describe, but so it's broadening the scope. And next slide, please. Okay, so reuse and repurposing. Okay, so this is part of Skylab, and a component, a door, part of a door from Gemini spacecraft was used. And so this is one example of reuse in space, and it's part of the past. And the people of that time, they had the wisdom that it would be not so nice if it gets lost. Next slide, please. But this is just an example. But there's so many others. For instance, all the efforts in vain, to no avail, to try to reuse the external tank. Of course, people say, it never works, it never will. It's not necessarily true. Just because it didn't work in the past, that doesn't mean in the future it won't. And please note that the tank, it's not even the full external tank. It's just a liquid hydrogen reservoir, the tip on top of the tank. And at the University of Texas at Austin, one of my professors there that I knew, Wallace Fowler, brought this up in the 80s. And there were some graduate students doing work on the reuse of external tanks. And as you can see, in 1985, this was already aware. People have been deeply aware of this. I remember a long time ago in the early 80s also, someone from space agency saying that a space classic rocket launch was like driving. I never forgot the image, the visual image. Was like driving brand new, many brand new Rolls Royce cars over a cliff, just throwing the money away. And well, I'm working on documenting all attempts that have been done to, of course, the shuttle was supposed to be reusable, all kinds of things, but people have been keenly aware of this, but only now with the Falcon rocket. But there were precursors. There was a Delta Clipper in 1991, and it was a branch that dried, broke off the tree, was canceled, like so many other extremely interesting things. And they were not wrong. Like you have a tree, there's a lightning bolt, it hits a branch, there's a hurricane, the tree gets ripped off, it gets all broken, there's a flood. That does not mean that that branch was not going in the right direction. It just means it was somehow destroyed. That the iteration led nowhere, but doesn't mean it was wrong or it was useless. And it's been very thought provoking. Just an example. I thought it was visually striking, the size of the waste. It's easier to see that way. Maybe. Next slide, please. Okay, and now focusing on something more specific, the International Space Station, and its future. Okay, I did not even get. I could speak a lot about the Orphans of Apollo, the movie about Mir. Skylab already was a similar story. There's what happened to Skylab and what happened to Mir. It's not that different from certain angles. There's some similar things. And as you can see, it looks like a little insect growing, like little versions of the same kind of bug growing in outer space, or the tip of the technium tree, or whatever wants to. The words are a bit misleading because this thing really is difficult to describe properly. But you see the International Space Station, as you can well see, several countries. And I think I'm still working on a deeper approach to how to prevent it from coming down prematurely. I'm not going to focus too much on that, not as much as I wish, but I think it's more important to have an intermediate step and focus on things that actually can be done. One of the things that can be done is that, as you can see, there are several countries. So in principle, they have a say about what's going to happen, not just one or two countries. Okay, that are represented there. And so please, the next slide. So ideally, and picking on the idea of space for all countries and also for all people. Some countries that the government wouldn't want to join in, they could also can you hear me? I think you
Yes,
can hear me,
yes, we
right?
can hear you. Yes, we can
Okay.
hear you.
So, all right. So, let's say, okay. So, how would it be possible? How it would? I was trying to visualize a way to get all these countries on board the ISS. Some of the flags are already there on the other slide, but as you can see, apparently it's impossible. But that again depends on how we think, because how big is ISS? If ISS was as big as an aircraft carrier, that wouldn't be so difficult. If ISS was 10 times bigger, this would be easier. However, the payloads can be also smaller and smaller, and there's a trend. There used to be on the space shuttle the Gateway Special canisters, those cylinders that were lower cost. Then there are many other things, and now we have the CubeSats, and then the nanosats, and then we have biotechnology, where things can be even smaller. And so what I argue on this presentation is that it's actually possible to put all these on board the ISS. Of course, if they're all on board, in principle, it will be more difficult to have it re-enter and be destroyed. It's an idea, okay? But how to get them all on board ISS? And that is my next slide. So now I'm just going to go back briefly to the Amazon jungle, to the light gap, and all the large space agencies, all the large countries, all the large space companies, they can be looked at as fully grown trees, or at least much thicker, taller, with bigger roots. And they're growing from Kourou, from Kennedy Space Center, from all the launch sites that are trying. Everyone tries to, well, not everyone, but it's clearly a tendency, just like with the analogs, which is something that's also fits in this model, and amount of analog missions, and all of them coming together in a single analog mission. In the end, it will be truly spaceship Earth. But going back to this light gap. So small things can survive if there's, as you can see on the forest, and they can grow. They'll never be as big, or not immediately as big as the others, but these things exist. And the way these light gaps are created is random. There's many other things from the forest, from different forests. There was a French project where they flew like a balloon over the canopies of tropical forests, and they realized there was a world in the canopy of the forests similar to the coral reef. So it's really well, anyway. So the idea of the light gap, there's a possibility to find this light gap, and this is just an example to illustrate how, because of course people say, oh, such a small country, the cost of having a big tree is, that's, besides it's going to take decades to grow, and it's just not doable. We eventually, Nepal can have their own, for instance, just picking one out of random, could have its module on ISS, but it will be quite a while, and it's going to be extremely expensive. And it's not so clear that people in that country or any other of all those flags for Space for All will actually spend the kind of money for a big tree. However, please, the next slide, please. This is a small thing that I did back in 1998. I was 37 years old, and those vials, they had microorganisms. They were placed on the space shuttle, and they flew. And that thing is incubator refrigerator module with a Peltier unit that keeps the temperature under control. But my goal is just to illustrate that you can have tiny, tiny, tiny microorganisms. And I could go into more details because this is already from 1998. And nowadays, with the microfluidics and all kinds of things, you can actually have payloads, microscopic payloads, or quite small, and you can have many on a relatively small area. Just like the small clearing on the beginning of the presentation, the light gap. It can, you can have many ants, you can have many butterflies, you can have many, many, many things on those light gaps. Next slide, please. So this is an example of on the Japanese module of small bacteria. They're really not that big. I mean, for a bacteria the size of the International Space Station is huge, and for a very miniaturized payload, it's really, really, really very. There's more than enough room for all the countries in the world, for all the non-profit organizations, for all the ONGs, for all the companies. In theory, they could all send something, and they would all be together on ISS. And then International Space Station would truly be completely international. No one unrepresented. All someone there. If some governments wouldn't want, some people with dual citizenship say, okay, look, my government doesn't think this is a really good idea, but I happen to disagree. I live in another country, and I kind of like this, and I'm going to send this. It's nobody's business, and I really want to do this. So it's way of the countries are not the overlords of the planet necessarily. They're supposed to represent the people that live on the planet. So, well, anyways, and then so there's room for many small things that can be there for a long time. And on the right is an exposure experiment that there's a human next to it, just to give an idea. It's long duration exposure. And this is critical because the whole goal that I have to contribute for the design for disassembly, you want to disassemble and you want to be able to use whatever parts you disassembled instead of destroying them. Instead of grinding them to their atoms or their molecules or into some nightmarish junkyard powder or just piles of rusting pieces of useless metal, scrap metal that's toxic and it's really like in the movie Wall-E. So you need to expose them to the space environment. And so if people don't want to send anything alive, they can send spare parts for things yet to be built. Nowadays, with reverse engineering, it's possible to understand how something was built. It's possible to disassemble it. There's already ways to design CubeSats to be disassembled and used for other things. In science fiction, this was used in sort of nightmarish scenarios like that movie Virus, where some electric force field with evil intentions invades the Mir space station and then tries to invade Earth. And the robots, they look like miniature Terminators, whatnot. All that is a bit folkloric. But yet the parts, if properly disassembled and if designed to be disassembled and used for other purposes, like it's already being done with buildings on Earth, there's really actually what I have in mind is, okay, everyone knows the rapid and scheduled disassembly, or unplanned, as this was coined apparently in the 1970s or 1980s. Now it's popular because of the creative engineers from SpaceX and other companies talk about rapid unscheduled disassembly. What I have in mind is a slow, chaotic disassembly. And the chaotic is a different way to disassemble things. But I'm working on it, and I hope to publish whenever I can. But it's possible to disassemble things without blowing them up, without trashing them out, without getting a hammer or an axe, just destroying everything or burning it in the atmosphere, turning into dust, toxic dust as well. But whatever. So it's possible to disassemble slowly, as one needs, just like the trees, just like the carcasses of dead animals, including ourselves on this planet, are reused gradually, not all at once. Just that's an example. Next slide, please. And I'm almost coming to the end. That's the long duration exposure facility launched by the shuttle. It's huge. It's huge. But the same approach as shown in the previous slide, but this is just to show how far one can go and how useful it was to have the long duration exposure facility. That, as if one goes and Googles it, you will see that it was not brought back when it was supposed to. It was exposed to space a lot longer than initially planned. And from micrometeoroid impacts, all kinds of subtle chemical and physical deterioration of the various components were studied thoroughly. And this is never finished. There's new materials, new circuitry, new things, and just about anyone on the planet can contribute with something that will be in long duration exposure. These payloads don't require power. They only need to be retrieved sometime in the future, one day. So that's these two examples: biotechnology, microscopic life, and long duration exposure. There's two things that I can see in my imagination being doable to make sure all countries have payloads, so to say, or are present physically on the ISS, just like the little piece of wood from the Kitty Hawk actually went to the moon. And it seems like it's just a sentimental thing. But if one thinks more deeply about it, I wonder if it's just a sentimental thing. I think it's more meaningful than that. And next slide, please. Next slide. Hello? Okay. Yeah, just going back if quickly. Okay, just to also show it's from a seat on an Airbus plane, the other satellite, the other picture we just went quickly. And what I want to close my presentation is to try to address forms of art. Yeah, that one. Thank you. So it's genetic algorithms. They try, and it's been around since 2003 at least. And this is for structural reinforcements on a component on an Airbus plane. And so there are several iterations, and it's quite obvious if you want to look at it that way that it looks a bit biological, like something that a tree would do, and that intricate network of is actually able to distribute the pressure. So the future of ISS might be covered with ISS and others, private space stations, other spacecraft. It doesn't have to be ISS. It's just that it would be really beautiful if we could actually have all countries and make it truly 100% international, or at least try and get as close as possible. Of course, being a little bit more realistic, but the goal itself I don't see why it's impossible. Exactly. So anyhow, this is just to illustrate that doesn't have to be limited only to the two examples that I gave. I just wanted to say that those two are doable. Then, of course, you could have all kinds of worms, insects, mud, all kinds of experiments for moon compost, for Martian compost. Well, yeah, that goes without saying, but at least I just want to focus on things that are more doable to start. And then if one manages to get all countries on board ISS, then the cross-pollination, cross-pollination, or potentially things will happen naturally, the way I can imagine. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is to be more thought-provoking about mentalities. So kids in China and Japan are using these rubbish bins, so because of the compost bin, and they realize they were cheaper than suitcases, and they just grab them off the streets. They buy them from suppliers, from sanitation, and they use them as to carry their luggage. They're not embarrassed. They don't feel poor. They just realize it's practical, and to me it's really thought-provoking, and maybe the people of the future will look at using things in a different way. The reuse of components, of course, the reuse of software, the reuse of special effects in science fiction movies in the form of art. This is quite interesting. What is modern? What's far out? Blade Runner 1982 is exactly the same special effects. And the Alien 1979, when the spacecraft is undocking from the mine, the spacecraft that had people inside, and then it was towing a huge mining operation behind, and when it detaches, that uses the same thing. And this is just to illustrate that software can be reused, things can be reused, and art may be a way to explore those things. The next slide continues that idea of art being able to explore. This is from a movie from Wim Wenders from 1991, where smartphones, they were very bulky, they had GPS, it was truly science fiction, and the movie is Until the End of the World. And what I find interesting in this work of art is that it, back in 1991, it foresaw things. On that image, the woman, she's addicted to watching her dreams on some kind of internet thing, and she cannot stop watching it. It's the disease of the images, something that that was truly then on the brighter side, so the movie is about getting a device that's able to record dreams, and the way I see it is more of a symbol. So using new technologies, she can see things in a new way. Has a downside because she gets in an endless loop, watching and watching and watching and watching and watching, rewatching her dreams until she has to have some kind of treatment like a drug addict. But at the same time, at the very ending of the movie from 1991, now please remember, International Space Station only started being built in 98, 99, and it took a long time to build. And 1991, basically like a decade before this, Until the End of the World, this movie from Wim Wenders, ended with the same girl now on ISS. And what is she doing on ISS? Her eyesight got changed because of her experiences, because she was particularly good at connecting to the machine. And she developed the skill to look at remote sensing of pollution on Earth. And if you look in the details on the end of the movie, it's some kind of Greenpeace or a Green Planet or some environmental organization that's monitoring the health of the planet at the end of the movie until the end of the world. So I think art can explore a future, and it's difficult for us to imagine a future where people are not embarrassed to have their smartphone fixed, to use an old car instead of buying a new one. I put the right to repair as a legal movement against being exploited by having the planned obsolescence, being forced to buy things that we really don't need. I hope the new commercial space stations will be designed in a more modern way. I think they are, but I don't know all the details, of course. Uh, Obviously, a number of things are proprietary, but I would like to think that they can be designed so that if ISS burns down too soon, and one day their turn will come, at least these new space stations will be able to be disassembled. And so the idea would be to make a movie about a future where things are futuristic, where they're different as that movie from 1991 was. It seemed a bit ludicrous. It seems unreal. And yet, we have environmental monitoring now on Earth from space at a level that, well, you see. So pretty much that's the end of the presentation. I think it's the last slide. No, there's one more. Okay. So you see the ISS, how huge it truly is, and how beautiful it is. And I really hope it lasts a bit longer, as long as possible. And one can see the moon. So at the end, and whatever is done on ISS, the level of the presence of all countries on ISS will be a good sign, a good precursor for what will happen on the moon. And I think even just for that, it's already worth having it orbit 5 more years, 8 more years, whatever is doable, but not in 2030. Okay, whenever. But it's just an idea. So I thank you for your patience, your time. I'm willing to answer any questions you may have, and thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your really interesting lecture. Yeah, I have many questions, but first I would like to take one from the chat. But I wanted to point out it's really nice that you mentioned art, and even in Russia, they asked Galina Andreevna Balashova to design the Mir station, and yeah, for better comfortability,
With the
and
colors,
it's
yes,
not so.
yes.
Genau. And you mentioned Mir space station, and 20 years ago, the Russian Mir space station was crashed into Earth and in the atmosphere, and it's on one hand it is good that they have not produced more space debris, but on the other side, I agree with you that it's the ISS should not be thrown away. And but also I like your idea with giving it free for all nations and that they can experiment there and so. But one of my questions is, do you know something about material fatigue phenomenon? Do there exist some examinations? Because, and you also mentioned to take parts of this. To deassemble it, but they might be contaminated radiation, and we have to think all of this. And one question from the chat I could include here is, are there already any useful conclusions on the long exposure in ISS?
Yes, many different things, including the fact that there's life forms on the whole of ISS already. And so, yes, it's quite useful about cold welding studies, the ultraviolet, just like on Earth, colors fade. But the what I would suggest is please, whoever is asking the question, to go in and read the technical reports from long duration exposure facility already, and everything that has been on the Japanese module. There's publications, and so it's easy nowadays. It's incredibly powerful, the internet, if used in a constructive way, I guess.
The
Yeah, you
question
can
was
you
from
can see, but there's a lot of things that and things don't have to be turned into scrap. Some components can be reused. It's just that it's truly futuristic, and we're really primitive and backwards, and we cannot imagine that well the strange future. Like it would be difficult to imagine an Uber in 1989 or something like that. People say, "Oh, really? No. How many will there be?" Yes, one in every corner. I'll tell you. You just click, and then the GPS from Earth orbit and this and that. People say, "Oh my God, this poor guy." You know. So yeah, it's that's why it's a challenge for the artists and I think Wim Wenders managed to really have a particularly interesting situation
yes.
in that 1991 Until the End of the World movie.
Yes, but I think in 1991 there was not that much awareness about environmental pollution, and
Oh, there was until Chernobyl and
but not as
1986.
much as today.
Perhaps,
And
yeah. Okay.
you were talking about deassembling. I know in former times they took the bricks from old buildings and after the World War II and rebuilt other buildings, but now it is made of concrete and it's not so easy to rebuild something from this. And
Mhm. Well, you
yeah,
see,
but
yeah, on my LinkedIn, if you go and look, there's an article about the French industry already doing that. The French are extremely creative and they're particularly modern in many ways, and they're
here's
promoting
another
that. But yes, it's possible. I see
question
what you're saying.
from the
The idea
chat.
is also to do partial, not full. Go ahead. Mhm. Tell me.
Hmm. Uh, the other question is, can you explain why we should continue sending humans into space when AI robots will do what needed in 30 years?
That's a good question. And actually,
It's from Roger Malina, and he was working on creativity in extreme environments, including the space arts.
absolutely. And look, one other possible iteration would be to have every country to have a robonaut on the moon, a robot on the moon or on ISS, controlled by someone the same way they control a drone. But there would be, no matter how big or small, of course, large countries could have like 20 robonauts potentially to take care of the infrastructure. But what I'm saying is that, yes, it doesn't have to be It doesn't have, if one explores this notion of technium, it doesn't have to be necessarily only humans, and it has to be a presence, just like that piece of wood from Kitty Hawk went to the moon. It can be some small country that has some kind of machine, and some piece of that machine ends up on the moon one day, and at a deeper level that can be satisfying as well. And so it's a broader thing. This thing I'm trying to visualize, it's so big, it's gargantuan. It's like a black hole. It's so big, it's difficult to really visualize. But yes, robonauts. Yes, no, of course, robots. So already Chandrayaan is on the moon. The people from India, they feel part of them is there too. So yeah, the robotic landings, the private missions, it's all it's an extension. It's an extension of the humans, and if enough tendrils from that creature, this technium, go to the moon, then at one time humans will follow naturally, as a natural thing, not forced, but just as a consequence of the growth. All the missions to Mars, you send first the hardware, then it grows. You have a self-replicating factory there. For a generation, it's just robots. Then, when humans get there, they have their hotel with their clean sheets and champagne.
Yes.
So,
Mm.
whenever it's in a way, it's secondary in a certain way.
Yes. Adriano, you wanted to say
Yeah.
something?
Okay. Okay. I have several questions about the disassemblement of the ISS. But first of all, I would like to disassemble a bit the question made by Roger, because he said that robots can do what is needed in 30 years. So my question is, what is needed? What do we need to do on the moon? Yeah, so my answer will be what humanity needs to do on the moon, and even not only on the moon, because what humanity needs is to start expanding into outer space very, very quickly, because our launch window could close very quickly because of social problems on Earth, because 8 billion people will not avoid to fight and to kill each other and to be very nervous about being closed in one only planet. So I think what humanity needs is to start going outside. And my other question is, why to continue sending people in space in microgravity? Because we did it for 60 years now, and it would be now, and it is now, time to start experimenting simulated gravity, because we need that if we are serious that we want to live and work in space. So this is some first consideration. You prefer that I give you also the questions about the ISS disassembling, or wait for a second turn, as you prefer.
Okay, back in 2014, DARPA had a few years. I presented a paper at the European Space Agency where they talked about satellites. So, there's the strawman fallacy, whereby in order to criticize a position, you criticize an extreme version of that position, which is obviously not what the person has in mind. And in this case, no one is really thinking, I don't think, to totally disassemble everything on ISS. Moreover, I totally agree with the idea of having a good chunk of it becoming a museum as well. Okay, as a symbol that even if we have horrible wars, sometime in the past, we were able to work together, and at least for a while. Okay, And that is not to be forgotten. That's worth a museum, a monument to the proof that at least we managed for a while until everything got too horrible. But those satellites from DARPA were like little CubeSat sized units that would be attached. And of course, certain things make economic sense, others are ludicrous. So yes, the solar panels, the radiators, the antennas, the whole idea, there's a market study, there's companies moving, all with lawyers and proprietary information about how to rip off antennas from derelict satellites and make real money with them. And the amount of money that people make on Earth, on spaceship Earth, stealing copper, tons of copper. A friend of mine was a very well-known musician, had a bronze plaque in the building where she lived. It was stolen. The bronze was stolen to be melted. She was very upset. No one will remember my music ever because they stole the plaque of the place where I lived. So this is deep. This is really, we really need metals, and we're gonna get them one way or the other. Therefore, it's a gradual thing. There's a common the whole idea that the movie would need to portray in a balanced, sober way an equilibrium between a gradual design becoming more and more frequent to be designed for disassembly. But if you think about the old Citroën from the 1960s, they were already designed. They were ahead in terms of design. You could replace those things. You didn't have to throw it away because you just, I put it on my Facebook, an example of how Citroën was futuristic and advanced. And so what has been happening, going back to the labyrinth, we go, myself included, through paths that lead nowhere, dead ends. And then we have to come back. And we say, geez, I really thought this was a great idea, but actually it leads nowhere. So no matter the cost, you cannot wait there until you pass away, because you have to realize that's not doable that way. So yes, this design for disassembly is something that will only grow with the consciousness, and the right to repair can be a powerful element, because in the end, if there's a problem on ISS and it was paid with taxpayers' money, and they say, I like that old thing, I'm sorry, you're not going to throw it away.
Listen,
it's mine too.
Just think about the reusable.
It's gradual.
How long 40 years spendable rockets were kept alive in the market because they were convenient for the lobbyists to go ahead without reusable rockets. We had to wait 2015.
Well, fair enough. It's a very good question, Adriano, and that is related to that book about the spaceflight revolution, where the author claims they were used if you want to have a rocket to deliver a nuclear warhead or a missile, and it's going to end up in like a ball of fire. You really don't care to have it reusable because it's going to, when it hits the target, it's a missile. It's a V2. You don't care. So that mindset, and that I had some slides about swords into plowshares and all kinds of things, dual use. I'm also exploring those things, and actually the military component of human society has
so you mean that the
wimps. Oh my God, you want to use that old thing? Oh my, what a loser. No. There's something, like a brand new, even Elon Musk, he's sometimes very abrasive, but he made the joke about that movie, The Dictator, that wanted the rocket to be more pointy. Come on. So people are aware there's something wrong there. More pointy. I mean, why?
The problem is that the mission requirement of the rockets were derived from military missiles. You're right. That's the point.
Yes.
And yeah, and Werner von Braun and other people to really design something no one wanted, the
So
liquid propulsion.
maybe the design requirement of the ISS were not for the reuse. So it would be
Um,
a bit
I
hard.
have no. It's a very good point,
No,
Adriano. Very good
my
point. However, no, you're bringing up a key element actually, is to tell you, but that's why I showed that like a person breaks an arm nowadays, you have a 3D printed thing to fix your arm, and so the structural elements, if there's political will from
yeah,
more than a few countries, that's
the,
exactly why I was thinking it would be really, look, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but we can try. And if all countries are there, in theory, the pressure of all those souls, all those people, all those human wills would put pressure to explore other parts of the labyrinth that have not yet really, and if it makes economic sense, because it could be good for the, for instance, the space station from Blue Origin has that. I really like one of their elements is that little cylinder that looks like a capsule from 2001. That would be perfect to go look at ISS and things along those lines. So the two things are not mutually exclusive. And I think the design for this assembly can obviously be more easily implemented on modern commercial space stations. It would make commercial sense to make a buck out of after we decommission.
yeah,
So it's
But
not.
but
there are several
but I think
several levels of disassembling and reuse. I mean,
Yes.
you can reuse
Yes.
parts, subsystems, or you can just reuse the materials if you cannot reuse subsystems. Just
Yes.
smash, get powders for 3D printing, and it will be better than.
Yes. 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 Yes.
However,
Yes.
I have
I think
another.
wait, I wanted to add something here.
I
But
wanted to make three other questions, but they're
it
very.
has no question. I wanted to add something to this point, but I think the economical part is very important, because when Elon Musk entered and the market became more competitive, and he presented the reusable rocket that gave a really push in this field, because before it was only made by governments, the rockets and so on, and yeah, they thought it's not reusable and the bureaucracy, but yeah, Elon Musk thought outside the box and cutted a lot of parts and said, okay, it has to be reusable because of economical reasons. And this is a great point, I think. And we should not have it out of our mind. Sorry, I wanted to add this.
Let's try to bring maybe Dinis to say some other interesting things that maybe, I don't know if you maybe you said something during your presentation, but it could be that I missed about that. So my question is, do you have an idea of a plan? I mean, three points. First, where should we stock the ISS in order to disassemble it? Should we disassemble it immediately or stock it somewhere and disassemble it in some time, let me say. Second. Third, we need some kind of orbital workshop with human technicians to do that. I hope so, because that will be a boost for the human mastering of the orbit. That's I think is our first place where to go and to stay and work. And last question, would it be disassembling and reusing convenient versus to bring new parts and new systems from Earth? I don't know if you made some kind of
An
reason,
equilibrium. Very good point.
a business plan, let's say.
Yes, a hybrid for sure, not a radical thing. That's the problem when people currently. That's why we need a movie that is truly educational, and because one thinks, oh my god, I'm going to build a factory
I,
twice
I
as big as ISS. That's got to be cheap. And then I'm going to melt ISS, and then I'm going to build another one. People say, oh, are you insane? You're gonna run out of money. So for sure, that's not doable at all. Okay. Astro scale, the Japanese, the US Space Force, they have plans. They've published. It's known. DARPA thinks about it. The Russians obviously too. Many people have been thinking about this for a long time. Even the Blue Origin was the first one to be able to land on its feet. Then the Falcon managed also, and we forget that there was Delta Clipper in 1991 landing vertically, and then it fell to the side and it blew up. The funding was cut, and there were decades of delay because of one explosion. So these things have had iterations. A balanced, gradual element is needed. The integrity of the modules from Europe, Japan, and others, other components, they are, from what I read from the studies, um, there was even some discussion here that I found extremely interesting from other people from Space Renaissance that know a whole lot better than me. We were discussing about the structural integrity, and they said this is not really true. There were some people trying to get a contract to do structural monitoring and saying, if we had been awarded that contract, we
yeah.
could monitor the integrity of the truss. But all those things are secondary. It's possible to the same way you can have the chassis of an old car with a new engine. You have planes from Second World War that still fly. You can 3D print components. You can reverse engineer everything with AI, and it's possible to create something that
Maybe.
is really futuristic and very different,
Mhm.
very similar, but at the same time, like in those movies about parallel universes where you say, oh my God, there's something wrong. What is this thing? And so, you have never seen a smartphone ever before? Pff, but how does it fit? But what's inside? But it's so thin. No, that cannot be. And yet it is. So, yeah, no, a gradual element. That's why I focus on things that are short term and they're doable. These small things, they're useful. And let's say 5 countries, they send things they think they're going to be decommissioned one day and used for something else. And then 20 years from now, those little bolts, they're completely useless. But 2 are actually very useful. Like in the movie The Martian, where he digs up Pathfinder in the deserts of Mars. And people say, that's toy. That's pointless. It should be sold for scraps or be in a museum. And yet, in that movie, The Martian, one is able to do something actually useful because the laws of physics, the metals, the molecules.
Well, to be a museum, it should be, however, it should be somehow inertized and closed in a structure in order because all machines get old, no? And
Mhm, mhm,
about
mhm,
what happened to the Russian module that had,
mhm,
and they were not able so far to understand where the leak is. So
mhm, mhm.
the ISS is
No,
still
I have no problem with being depressurized and then having robonauts inside, and the
yeah.
people would travel inside the ISS through the.
Museum, you have to recondition it to
Uh,
revamp it. Okay.
mhm, yeah, 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 yeah. Well, you have enough material for museums from Apollo.
I had
Yeah.
another idea a couple of years ago. I started to toy with the concept that we have the ISS and at the end of its life cycle, we could cut it in the half and widen between the two parts resulting, connect them by a cable and start making them rotating, and we will have the first simulated gravity
Yeah, okay.
station.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, but it's a possible reuse. Yeah.
made a trade-off on that, and the conclusion was that it was less expensive to make a new thing than.
Yes, I think in any case, we should reuse it and not throw it away.
But
Because
yes.
who does it belong to? How international is it? Is it really international? And if
Yes.
our goal is space for all, then this would be a provocative thing. Even if we fail, we may well fail because realistically, come on. But so what? We tried. And people from some small country just says, well, that thing, excuse me, it's from all mankind, is it not? Because the owners now, they have more modern things. This, they don't use it. Why do they want to destroy it? Because you see, I'm also exploring, the connection between the principal investigators and this whole Viking thing about burning the Viking ship with the king inside. There's the ritual by fire. There's this. Are these things like noble knights, and they must die a fiery death in their glory because of? Look, if you start looking at it from a point of view of an anthropologist, and it's this whole people crying because the robot on Mars said it's getting dark and I have no battery, and I've seen people cry because of the last message from a robot. This anthropomorphic thing, these things are a lot more part of us. And of course, if it's gone, then you have to build a new one. So this is connected because you see, there's CERN, there's European Space Agency, the Centre National de Recherche Nucléaire. And there's a whole logic of the life and death of a glorious Nobel Prize PI. That then there are strings attached that might distort our vision of what a spacecraft is. And these things about the fiery death on Jupiter of the Galileo probe, for instance, not actually cleaned from a bacteria, by the way. But the point being, that is done so that funds will become available, because there's no other way to do it, because it's gone forever. It's ashes.
Yes. But I think as for the ISS, it's also a question of maintenance. And you have to have always astronauts there to maintain the station. So I think this is a big point.
Well, a human being alive has to have maintenance. If we don't
Yes.
eat, if we don't breathe, we die. If we
but,
have the disease, we don't fix it, we're gone. So
yeah,
we
but
need maintenance. But I see what you're saying.
we're asking about to whom
yes.
it belonged and who will decide. No, so this will be an international decision, I think. I would like to close now. I really, really thank you for being here with us, and we had a lively discussion. It was really interesting, and thank you, Adriano, for joining us too, and for
thank you for your introduction. Thank you for conducting this.
Yeah, thank you. And I wanted to point out, we are a non-profit organization. We always need some help. Adriano wrote in the chat, if you want to support us, you can become a member, you can support us in another way. And all our lecturers are giving this lecture for free, as though they are not paid. We are doing it in a voluntary way. And the next time, on the 16th of September, there will be no webinar because Adriano will be in New York for the UN. He can tell something more. And And the next webinar will be on the 7th of October. Jerry Gallagher will talk, and the title is not communicated so far, but I guess it will be an interesting lecture too. And Adriano, you wanted to say something about the UN?
About what? Sorry?
And the UN in New York, where you are on the 16th of September.
Sure, sure. So the 19th of September, we will have a workshop that is called Space 18 SDG for the Future. It will be the 19th of September will be the day before the beginning of the Summit of the Future made by the ECOSOC Committee of the UN. It will be for 4 days, and so we will make our workshop just before in order to give some recommendation. We all of our workshop discuss the whole day and then end with a final recommendation that we will use then for our work at COPWAS, the Committee for the Pacific Uses of Outer Space, for our work in the UN General Assembly and everything regarding the United Nations and the work we are doing to make public opinion at large to be aware of what is happening at UN and what the COPWAS and UNUs are doing and all this kind of thing that nobody knows anything in the normal society. So one of our goals is to make that to be known and to allow people to support us in our work. We are also making a critical review of the Space 2030 agenda that it doesn't mention space settlement at all. So it only thinks about space as useful for Earth and not as an arena where humanity can expand, and then when we have a civilian space development, and in order to allow civilization to keep on growing and progressing. So this is a very, very big point. We are very committed to make some amendments to the 2030 space agenda. And yeah, so all of these things will be discussed the 19th of September, and everybody are invited or to join in New York or to connect virtually or even only to attend on YouTube like we are doing today, because we need the support of everybody, all space activists, and not only all the humanists think that humanity has to go ahead and not to crash in crazy wars and fight for the same small limited resources of our planet. So this is more or less in few words, because we
Thank you, Adriano. And thank you to our audience for joining us. Thank you again, Dinis, for your lecture, for having you here. And we see us back on the 7th of October with a new webinar, and I hope you will join us too. And yeah, and I wish you a nice week. Thank you. Bye, and ad astra.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. I've just put also the link to register to the 19th of September in the chat. So if somebody wants.
Thank you.